Arizona Territory, 1875. The relentless summer sun beat down on the parched earth, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold. Dust devils danced across the horizon where the sky met the distant mountains, a beautiful yet unforgiving land where only the strongest survived. Here, in this harsh frontier, love was considered a luxury few could afford, especially for a man like Quentin Xavier. Quentin adjusted his worn Stetson, shielding his eyes from the glare as he scanned the horizon. At 26, he had the lean, muscular build of a man who spent his days in the saddle, his handsome face weathered slightly by sun and wind. A light stubble covered his strong jaw, and his blue eyes carried a wariness that came from years of surviving on the frontier. "Only fools get attached out here," he muttered to his paint horse as they followed the cattle trail. The words were a mantra he'd adopted after watching his father waste away from grief when his mother died of fever 10 years back. Quentin had learned the lesson well. The West took everything you loved eventually. Better to remain unattached, free to move when trouble found you, and trouble always found you. His reputation as one of the best cowboys in the territory had earned him steady work with the Double Creek Ranch, but Quentin never stayed in one place longer than a season. Movement meant survival. Attachment meant vulnerability. Those were the rules he lived by. What Quentin wanted was simple, enough money to buy his own small spread someday, somewhere quiet where he could raise horses, not answering to anyone. What he needed, though he would never admit it, was something to fill the emptiness that grew wider with each passing year, a loneliness he drowned in whiskey when it became too loud to ignore. The cattle drive had been grueling, 3 weeks pushing longhorns north with little sleep and less comfort. Now, just a day's ride from Copper Springs where they would deliver the herd, Quentin and 2 other hands had split off to recover several strays that had wandered into a narrow canyon. "Should be just ahead," he called to the others. "I'll check that side wash." The canyon narrowed, cottonwoods clinging to the banks of a small stream that cut through the rock. Quentin followed the hoofprints into the shade, grateful for the respite from the heat. The sound of rushing water grew louder as he rounded a bend, then he reined his horse sharply to a halt. There, kneeling beside the stream, was a young woman. She wore a simple dress of buckskin, adorned with intricate beadwork that caught the dappled sunlight. Her long, straight black hair fell like a curtain down her back as she filled a water skin. She was Apache, that much was clear from her dress and the distinctive patterns of her moccasins. Before Quentin could retreat unnoticed, his horse snorted, alerting the woman to his presence. She whirled, eyes wide with alarm, reaching for something at her waist. "I mean no harm," Quentin said quickly, raising his hands to show they were empty. "Just tracking some strays." The woman hesitated, her hand still hovering near what he now saw was a knife. She was stunning, perhaps 20 years old, with high cheekbones and eyes so dark they appeared almost black, regarding him with equal parts fear and defiance. "American cattle," she said finally in perfect English, surprising him. "They went that way," she pointed upstream, frightening the deer. Quentin nodded, unable to look away from her face. There was something in her expression, a pride, an intelligence that held him transfixed. For the first time in years, he felt an unfamiliar stirring of interest that went beyond mere appreciation of a beautiful woman. "I'm Quentin Xavier," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Double Creek Ranch." She studied him for a long moment before responding. "Falana Hopi," she paused. "Though at the mission school, they called me Faith." The mention of a mission school explained her English, but there was something in the way she said it that hinted at painful memories. "Are you alone out here, Miss Hopi?" he asked, suddenly concerned for her safety. Apache women rarely traveled far from their people, especially with tensions between settlers and tribes remaining high even after the recent treaties. "I can take care of myself," she replied, the knife still visible in her grip. A distant shout from one of the other cowboys broke the moment. Quentin glanced back toward the main canyon, then at Falana again. "I should go before my friends come looking," he said, "but is your camp nearby? This area can be dangerous, not just because of wolves or mountain lions." What he meant was clear enough. White settlers and soldiers weren't always kind to lone Native Americans, especially women. Falana's expression hardened. "Yes, white men are often the most dangerous predators in these mountains." Her words carried the weight of experience, making Quentin wince internally. "My people are close enough." He nodded, sensing she wouldn't welcome further questions. "The cattle, they didn't trample any of your plants, did they?" Her expression shifted slightly, surprised by his concern. No. Not this time. Good, Quentin backed his horse a few steps. I'll make sure to keep better track of our strays from now on. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. The medicine plant that grows by the water, Yanadi, it helps with fever. Your friend at the camp has been coughing. I heard it last night when you passed the ridge. Quentin stared at her, stunned both by her knowledge of their party and her offer of help. How did you? I watch, I listen. She knelt and gathered several stems of a plant with delicate white flowers. Brew this, not too strong. She held the bundle out to him. After a moment's hesitation, Quentin leaned down from the saddle to take it, their fingers brushing momentarily. Thank you. Your cattle go that way, she repeated, pointing upstream again. You should find them before dark. With that dismissal, Quentin nodded his thanks and turned his horse, aware that Falana was watching him leave. As he rejoined his companions and helped recover the strays, his thoughts kept returning to the woman by the stream. Despite his rules about attachment, he found himself hoping their paths might cross again before the cattle drive ended. That night at camp, Quentin brewed the plants for Miguel, the hand who'd been fighting a cough for days. By morning, the man breathed easier. When asked where he'd learned about the medicine, Quentin gave a vague answer about an old trapper showing him once. Some of the men would take unkindly to help from an Apache, no matter how effective the remedy. The next day, they delivered the herd to Copper Springs. Most of the cowboys headed straight for the saloons, eager to spend their pay after weeks on the trail, but Quentin found himself restless. After depositing his gear at the boarding house, he rode back out of town, telling himself he was just scouting potential grazing land. He found himself returning to the canyon, following the stream to the spot where he'd met Falana. There was no sign of her, of course. He dismounted anyway, leading his horse to drink while he examined the plants growing along the banks, trying to memorize the appearance of the medicine she had given him. You returned, her voice came from behind him, causing Quentin to spin around. Falana stood several yards away, this time dressed in a calico dress with an Apache blanket draped over her shoulders, a curious blend of white and native clothing that somehow suited her perfectly. Her long black hair was braided today, accentuating the graceful line of her neck. Your medicine worked, Quentin said simply. I wanted to thank you properly. Is that all? There was a hint of amusement in her eyes now. Quentin felt heat rise to his face. I suppose I wanted to see you again too. The admission surprised them both. Falana's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Most white men would not admit such a thing to an Apache woman. I'm not most men, Quentin replied, and you're not just any woman. The words hung between them, charged with possibility. Falana took a step closer, studying him with those penetrating dark eyes. No, she agreed quietly. I am not. My father was Apache. My mother was Navajo. I belong fully to neither world. And then the soldiers came when I was 10 and took many children to the eastern schools. Her voice took on a harder edge. They thought they could erase who we were, make us forget our ways. But you came back, Quentin observed. Yes. 3 years ago when I was 17, some never do. She looked away toward the distant mountains. Some cannot find their place again. I live between worlds now. The revelation explained much about her perfect English, her blend of clothing, the wariness in her eyes. She had experienced a forced separation from her culture, only to return and find herself caught between two worlds, not fully belonging to either. It must be difficult, he said. Falana gave him a measured look. Is that pity, Cowboy? No, Quentin replied honestly. Respect. Something shifted in her expression then, a small opening in her carefully maintained guard. Why did you really come back here today? She asked. The question forced Quentin to confront his own motivations. By his own rules, he should be in town, drinking with the other cowboys, not seeking out this connection that could only lead to complications. And yet here he was. I don't rightly know, he admitted. Something about you stayed with me. Falana took another step toward him. That is dangerous talk. Probably, Quentin agreed with a slight smile. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of the stream and distant birdsong. Finally, Falana spoke again. I am gathering plants along the stream. If you wish to learn which ones heal and which ones harm, you may walk with me. The invitation was casually offered, but Quentin recognized it for the significant gesture it was. "I'd like that very much." For the next hour, they walked along the stream as Falana pointed out various plants, explaining their uses with the expertise of someone who had been taught by elders who had passed down knowledge through generations. Quentin listened attentively, asking questions that revealed his genuine interest. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, Quentin realized he should return to town before dark. "Will you be here tomorrow?" he asked, surprising himself with his directness. Falana considered him for a long moment. "Perhaps. My people's camp is hidden in the valley beyond those hills. We stay away from the town and the soldiers." "Smart," Quentin commented. "There's been trouble lately." "There is always trouble between your people and mine," she replied matter-of-factly. "The treaties mean little when ranchers want more land or miners find gold." The brutal truth of her statement hung between them. They stood on opposite sides of a conflict that had claimed countless lives. "Not all of us want war," Quentin said quietly. "No," she agreed, "but many do. That is why we stay hidden, gathering what we need, staying away from white settlements." She hesitated, then added, "My uncle is one of our band's leaders. He would not approve of me speaking with you." "And yet you are," Quentin observed. A small, enigmatic smile touched her lips. "I make my own judgments about people." "And what's your judgment of me?" he asked, his heart inexplicably racing as he awaited her answer. "I think you are a man who has built walls around himself," she said, her insight striking uncomfortably close to the truth. "But there are cracks in those walls." She handed him a small bundle of herbs she had collected. "For your friend. In case the cough returns." Their fingers touched again during the exchange, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Quentin felt an electric connection that both thrilled and terrified him. "Thank you, Falana." "You should go now," she said, glancing at the setting sun. "It is not good for you to be seen with me." Though the warning was practical, it carried a heavier implication, a reminder of the societal barriers between them. Quentin nodded, reluctantly mounting his horse. "Tomorrow," he said, not quite a question. Falana merely nodded, her expression unreadable as she watched him ride away. Over the next week, Quentin found excuses to ride out to the canyon each day. Sometimes Falana was there, sometimes not, but when she appeared, they would walk together, talking of plants, horses, the changing seasons, careful, neutral topics that nevertheless allowed them to circle closer to understanding each other. On the fifth day, as they sat by the stream eating wild berries Falana had gathered, she asked him the question that had clearly been on her mind. "Why do you not have a wife, Quentin Xavier?" "You are old enough." Quentin nearly choked on a berry, unprepared for the direct question. When he recovered, he found Falana watching him with those perceptive eyes. "I move around too much," he said finally. "No woman wants a husband who's gone half the year on cattle drives." "That is not the real reason," she observed quietly. Quentin stared at the stream, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "My mother died when I was 16. Fever took her in less than a week. My father, he was never the same after, stopped eating, stopped working, just sat on the porch staring at nothing. 6 months later, he was gone too." He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his fingers. "The doctor said his heart gave out, but I knew better. He died of grief." Falana was silent, letting him continue at his own pace. "That's when I learned that loving someone that much is a weakness out here. The frontier takes enough without you giving it your heart to break too." He tossed the stone into the water. "So I decided I wouldn't put down roots. Wouldn't give anyone or anything the power to destroy me like that." "And this has made you happy?" Falana asked, her voice gentle but challenging. "It's kept me alive," Quentin responded, though the answer rang hollow even to his own ears. "There is a difference between living and being alive," she said. "My grandfather taught me that. He said a life without connection is like a stream that never reaches the river. It simply disappears into the sand, leaving nothing behind." The wisdom struck Quentin deeply, making him uncomfortable with its truth. Before he could respond, a distant sound made Falana tense. She stood quickly, listening. "Horses coming this way," she said, her voice urgent. "Several riders." Quentin stood as well, straining to hear. Now he caught it too, the unmistakable sound of approaching horsemen. "Could be anyone," he said, but knew by her expression that Falana feared the worst. "I must go," she said, gathering her things. "If they are soldiers." Wait, Quentin caught her arm gently. If they're searching, they'll fan out through the canyon. Let me help you. Indecision flashed across her face, then she nodded sharply. My horse is hidden beyond those rocks. Quentin quickly led his own horse up a narrow path to where Falana's pony was tethered in a small hidden grotto. The sounds of riders grew louder. They'll see our tracks by the stream, he said, thinking quickly. I'll ride out and meet them, distract them. You circle around the back way to your camp. Why would you risk yourself for me? Falana asked, her dark eyes searching his face. The question caught Quentin off guard, making him confront feelings he had been avoiding acknowledging. Because I care what happens to you, he admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. Something shifted in Falana's expression, a softening, a momentary vulnerability that showed her own conflicted feelings. Impulsively, she reached up and pressed something into his hand, a small leather pouch on a cord. Protection, she said simply. Go now. Without thinking, Quentin leaned down and pressed his lips briefly to hers. The kiss lasted only seconds, but it sent warmth spreading through his chest. When he pulled back, Falana's eyes were wide with surprise, but she didn't look angry. I will find you again, he promised, slipping the cord around his neck. Yes, she whispered. You will. They parted then, Quentin riding boldly toward the approaching horsemen, while Falana disappeared silently in the opposite direction. As he emerged from the side canyon, he found himself facing not soldiers, but a group of cowboys from Double Creek Ranch. Xavier, called the foreman, Hank Peterson, thought that might be your horse. What are you doing out here? Quentin relaxed slightly, though he remained wary, just exploring a bit before the next drive. Boss mentioned we might move cattle through this area come fall. Peterson nodded, seemingly accepting the explanation. Well, good timing running into you. Got word from town, another herd's coming through next week, and we're short-handed. Boss is offering double pay for experienced hands. Sounds good, Quentin said, casually angling his horse to block the view of the side canyon where fresh tracks might reveal Falana's presence. As they rode back toward Copper Springs, Quentin's thoughts remained with Falana. The kiss had been impulsive, breaking every rule he'd set for himself about remaining unattached. Yet he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The small medicine pouch hung against his chest, a tangible reminder of the connection he'd just acknowledged, and the dangerous path he was now choosing to walk. The next morning, Quentin woke before dawn, determined to reach the canyon early to ensure Falana had made it safely back to her people. As he saddled his horse behind the livery stable, a voice startled him. Awful interested in those hills lately, ain't ya, Xavier? Quentin turned to find Silas Morgan, a surly cowhand known for his quick temper and prejudice against Indians. The man leaned against the stable wall, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Just enjoying the quiet before the next drive, Quentin replied evenly, continuing with his preparations. Morgan pushed himself off the wall, approaching slowly. Funny thing, Peterson mentioned seeing you out there yesterday made me remember something. He took a drag of his cigarette. Couple weeks back, I was hunting up that way. Thought I spotted smoke from a fire. Indian camp, I'd bet my last dollar. Quentin's hand stilled momentarily on the cinch, then resumed tightening it. Lots of travelers pass through these parts. Probably just a hunting party. Maybe, Morgan drawled. Or maybe it's that band of Apache that's been stealing cattle from the North Range. Military's been looking for 'em. Haven't heard about any stolen cattle, Quentin said carefully. Morgan's eyes narrowed. You sweet on an Indian girl, Xavier, that why you're sneaking out there every day. The accusation, too close to the truth, made Quentin's jaw tighten. He straightened, facing Morgan directly. My business is my own. I suggest you mind yours. Indians are everyone's business out here, Morgan spat. They kill white folks, we kill them. That's the natural order. Quentin stepped closer, his voice dropping dangerously. You planning on doing something stupid, Morgan? The tension between them crackled, Morgan's hand drifting toward his gun, but after a tense moment, he stepped back with a forced laugh. Just making conversation, but if I were you, I'd be careful about keeping certain company. People might get the wrong idea. He flicked his cigarette away, or the right one. The threat hung in the air as Morgan sauntered away. Quentin stood motionless, his heart pounding with anger and fear, not for himself, but for Falana and her people. Morgan was exactly the type to lead a group of hot-headed cowboys on an Indian hunt if he suspected there was a camp nearby. The encounter only strengthened Quentin's resolve to find Falana and warn her. He mounted quickly and rode out of town, taking a circuitous route to ensure he wasn't followed. When he reached the canyon, he moved cautiously, alert for any sign of danger. At their usual meeting place, there was no sign of Falana. Quentin waited for hours, his concern growing with each passing minute. By midday, he had convinced himself something had happened. Either she had been captured by soldiers or her people had moved their camp after yesterday's close call. Just as he was preparing to leave, movement caught his eye across the stream. Falana emerged from the trees, more guarded than usual, scanning the area carefully before approaching. "You should not have come today," she said without preamble. "It is too dangerous now." "That's why I had to come," Quentin replied, relief washing over him at seeing her safe. "A man in town, Morgan, he suspects there's an Apache camp nearby. He's the type who might gather others to search for it." Alarm flashed across Falana's face. "My uncle was right, we have stayed too long in one place." She looked away, conflict evident in her expression. "We begin moving deeper into the mountains tonight." The news hit Quentin harder than expected. "When will you return?" "We will not," she said softly. "The soldiers press closer every season. We must go where they cannot follow easily." Quentin felt a tightening in his chest, the very pain he had spent years avoiding. "Let me come with you just to the edge of the mountains, to make sure you're safe." Falana shook her head firmly. "That would endanger us both. My people would kill you on sight, and if you were followed," she left the consequences unspoken. "Then what?" Quentin asked, unable to accept that this might be their final meeting. "We just say goodbye here. It is the way things must be." But despite her words, Falana stepped closer, her own struggle visible in the tension of her shoulders. "I knew this day would come. I should never have allowed myself to." When she didn't finish, Quentin closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "To care." Yes, the admission seemed torn from her. It was foolish. "Our worlds cannot merge, Quentin." "Maybe they can," he said urgently. "Not here, not now, but somewhere else. After your people are settled safely, I could find you." Falana's eyes searched his face, hope warring with practicality. "How the mountains are vast." "I'll find a way," Quentin insisted, surprising himself with his determination. The rules he had lived by for years seemed meaningless in the face of losing her. 3 months from now, when winter begins to set in, there's an old trading post at the base of the Blue Mountains. I'll wait there every Sunday until the first snow." It was a desperate plan, full of uncertainty, but Falana's expression softened. "My people sometimes trade there for supplies they cannot make themselves." "Then you'll come?" he asked, hardly daring to hope. Instead of answering, Falana reached up and pulled his face down to hers, kissing him with an intensity that took his breath away. When they finally parted, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "If I can find a way, I will come," she promised. "But you must understand, my loyalty must be to my people first." "If it is too dangerous." "I understand," Quentin said, though his heart rebelled at the thought. "Just try." They stood together for a long moment, memorizing each other's faces. Then Falana stepped back, composing herself. "Wear my medicine pouch," she said, touching the leather bag that hung around his neck. "It will keep you safe until we meet again." "I won't take it off," he promised. With visible effort, Falana turned away. "You should go now. Return to town before Morgan becomes suspicious of your absence." Quentin knew she was right, but leaving felt impossible. "Falana." "Go," she said firmly, not looking back. "And remember your promise, the trading post." "First snow." He watched her disappear into the trees, taking a piece of his heart with her. For a man who had spent years avoiding attachment, the hollow ache in his chest was unfamiliar and frightening. Yet beneath the pain lay something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The summer months crawled by with agonizing slowness. Quentin took every job offered, working himself to exhaustion to keep his mind from constant worry about Falana. Had her people made it safely to the mountains? Had soldiers found them? Was she thinking of him as often as he thought of her? Morgan had indeed tried to organize a search party for the Indian camp, he suspected, but fortunately, most of the local cowboys had been too busy with cattle drives to join him. Quentin had carefully spread the word that he'd explored the entire canyon and found no sign of recent habitation, hoping to throw the man off the scent. As autumn approached, Quentin began making preparations. He saved every dollar, purchased supplies that would be valuable for trade, and quietly inquired about available land near the Blue Mountains. When Falana came to the trading post, he wanted to be ready to offer her more than just promises. Finally, as the first chill of autumn crept into the air, Quentin took his pay, packed his few possessions, and rode north toward the trading post. He arrived 3 weeks before their agreed meeting time, using the extra days to familiarize himself with the area and establish a friendly relationship with the old man who ran the post. Ezekiel Thompson had operated the remote outpost for over 30 years, trading with both settlers and various native tribes. His weathered face revealed nothing when Quentin explained he was looking to settle in the area and was interested in learning which local tribes might be amenable to peaceful coexistence. Apache been seen east of here, moving through the high passes, the old man offered eventually. Soldiers don't bother chasing them up there much anymore, too much trouble for too little glory. Quentin nodded, careful not to show too much interest. They trade here sometimes. Women come down occasionally, men stay back watching. Thompson eyed him shrewdly. You got particular business with the Apache. Just want to avoid trouble, Quentin replied smoothly. Figure knowing where different groups are might help with that. Thompson seemed to accept this, though his penetrating gaze suggested he suspected there was more to Quentin's story. Well, stick around if you want. They sometimes come before the heavy snows looking for cloth, sugar, coffee, things they can't make themselves. Quentin did exactly that, taking a job helping Thompson with repairs to the trading post and hunting to supplement their food stores. Each Sunday, as promised, he positioned himself visibly at the trading post, watching the trails that led down from the mountains, hope and anxiety warring within him. 3 Sundays passed with no sign of Falana or any Apache traders. As the 4th Sunday dawned with a dusting of early snow on the ground, Quentin's hope began to fade. Perhaps her people had gone another direction. Perhaps she had reconsidered the foolishness of their connection, or worse, perhaps something had happened to prevent her coming. The day grew colder as clouds gathered, promising heavier snow by nightfall. Thompson watched Quentin's increasingly restless pacing with knowing eyes. Waiting on someone particular, ain't you, boy? Quentin hesitated, then nodded. There seemed little point in denying it now. Figured as much, the old man said, lighting his pipe. Apache girl, I'm guessing, given your questions. Startled by the man's perception, Quentin merely stared. Thompson chuckled. Been running this post 40 years, seen it all. Even saw a white trapper marry a Cherokee woman back in 51. Lasted, too, till cholera took them both in 65. The implicit approval in the old man's voice gave Quentin courage. Her name is Falana. We agreed to meet here before the first snow. Well, Thompson said, glancing at the light dusting outside, this ain't proper snow yet, just a warning of what's coming tonight. He puffed thoughtfully on his pipe. That path there, he pointed to a nearly invisible trail winding up the mountainside, that's the one they usually take, comes down from a hidden valley about 5 miles up. Quentin's gaze fixed on the trail, a renewed surge of hope coursing through him. Thank you. The old man nodded. Hope she makes it before the real storm hits, going to be a bad one. As the afternoon wore on, the snow began falling more heavily. Quentin stood on the trading post porch, scanning the mountainside until his eyes burned from the strain and the cold. Still, no sign of movement. By dusk, the snow was falling in earnest, thick flakes obscuring visibility beyond 100 yards. Thompson came out, lantern in hand. Best come inside, son. If they ain't come by now, they won't be traveling in this. Quentin knew the old man was right. No one with any frontier sense would attempt mountain trails in a developing blizzard. Still, he lingered a moment longer, sending a silent prayer into the darkening sky. As he turned to follow Thompson inside, a flicker of movement caught his eye. There, through the curtain of snow, a shadowy figure on horseback emerged from the tree line. Then another behind it. Quentin's heart leapt to his throat as he strained to see through the swirling white. Thompson, he called urgently, someone's coming. The old trader hurried back out, holding the lantern high. Its light caught the approaching riders, 3 figures bundled against the cold, leading pack horses. Apache, Thompson confirmed quietly. Women. Quentin stood frozen, watching as the riders approached cautiously. The lead figure pulled back the hood of her blanket coat, revealing a face he had dreamed of for months. Falana. She saw him at the same moment, her controlled expression breaking into momentary relief before she composed herself again. The two women with her, an older woman and a young girl who resembled Falana, watched warily as Quentin stepped off the porch into the snow. "You came," he said, unable to keep the emotion from his voice. "I said I would try," Falana replied, her voice carrying the same careful neutrality she had used during their first meeting, though her eyes told a different story. "The storm comes earlier than expected. We must trade quickly and return." Thompson stepped forward smoothly. "You ladies are welcome to shelter here tonight. No traveling back up that mountain in this weather." The older woman shook her head firmly. "We cannot stay." "Grandmother," Falana said softly in Apache, then switched back to English. "The trader is right. The trail will be dangerous now, impossible by morning." A rapid exchange in Apache followed between Falana and her grandmother, with the younger girl occasionally adding comments. Quentin watched, understanding nothing of the words but reading the tension in their postures. Finally, the grandmother gave a sharp nod. "One night only, we leave at first light." Thompson helped them stable their horses while Quentin brought their trading goods inside. As they worked, Falana managed to fall into step beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "I feared you would not be here," she said quietly. "I promised," Quentin replied simply. "I would have waited until spring." Her eyes softened. Many men make promises they do not keep. "I'm not many men." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "No, you are not." Inside the trading post, business proceeded with formal efficiency. The Apache women traded furs, intricately woven baskets, and dried herbs for coffee, sugar, cloth, and ammunition. Throughout the transactions, Falana's grandmother, introduced as Nantai, watched Quentin with undisguised suspicion, while the younger girl, Falana's 16-year-old sister Ziva, regarded him with open curiosity. As the evening progressed, Thompson tactfully arranged sleeping areas that gave the Apache women appropriate privacy, while allowing Quentin and Falana to speak quietly near the fire after the others had settled. "Your people made it safely to the mountains?" Quentin asked, drinking in the sight of her. Falana nodded. "Yes, though it was a difficult journey. Soldiers followed for the first week, but we know ways through the canyons they fear to travel." She glanced toward her sleeping family. "My uncle did not want any of us to come to the trading post this season. He said it was too dangerous with increased military patrols." "Then how did you convince him?" A small, proud smile curved her lips. "I did not ask his permission. My grandmother decided we needed supplies, and what Nantai decides, few argue with, even my uncle." Quentin laughed softly. "I can see why." The old woman had the bearing of someone accustomed to respect, and the sharp eyes of a person who missed nothing, including, he suspected, the feelings between him and Falana. "She knows," Falana confirmed, following his gaze. "About us, not everything, but enough." "And she came anyway, that seems surprising." Falana's expression grew more serious. "My grandmother believes in signs and visions. She had a dream about a white man with a medicine pouch." Her fingers lightly touched the leather bag still hanging around Quentin's neck. "She said such a man would either bring great destruction or great healing to our family." The weight of those possibilities hung between them. "And which does she believe I will bring?" "She has not decided yet," Falana replied honestly. "That is why she watches you so closely." They talked through the night, speaking softly of the months apart, of their hopes and fears. Quentin told her about the small plot of land he had found, fertile acres with good water rights, far enough from settlements to offer privacy, but close enough to reach the trading post when needed. "It could be a place for both of us," he said carefully, "if you wanted that." Falana's eyes widened. "You are asking me to leave my people." "I'm asking you to consider a life with me," Quentin clarified. "One where you wouldn't have to choose between worlds. We could build something that honors both." The proposal hung between them, momentous in its implications. Falana looked away, conflict evident in her expression. "My people need me," she said finally. "Especially now with winter coming. I know the old medicines, the healing ways. My grandmother has been teaching me since I returned from the mission school. Quentin nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. I understand. But she continued, meeting his eyes again. When spring comes, perhaps. Perhaps there might be a way, if you're still willing to wait. Hope flared in Quentin's chest. I would wait years for you, Falana. She smiled then, a full, radiant smile that transformed her face. Not years, just until the snow melts in the high passes. They spent the remaining hours of night planning, dreaming, finding moments to touch hands or exchange brief, tender kisses when certain they were unobserved. By dawn, as the storm abated and weak sunlight filtered through the trading post windows, Quentin felt both elated and terrified, elated at finding Falana again, terrified of the months of separation still ahead. As the Apache women prepared to leave, loading their newly acquired supplies, Nantai approached Quentin directly for the first time. You wear my granddaughter's medicine, she said in accented but clear English, pointing to the pouch at his neck. Yes, Quentin replied, meeting the old woman's penetrating gaze steadily. It has protected me, as she said it would. Nantai studied him, her weathered face unreadable. You think you love her. It wasn't a question, but Quentin answered anyway. I know I do. Love is not enough between your people and mine, she stated flatly. There is too much blood. With respect, Quentin said carefully, Falana and I aren't peoples. We're just a man and a woman trying to find our way. The old woman's expression remained stern, but something shifted in her eyes. A reluctant acknowledgement, perhaps, or simply recognition of his resolve. When the blue flowers bloom on the mountainside, she said finally, come to the large rock that looks like a sleeping bear. Wait 3 days. If it is meant to be, someone will find you. With that cryptic instruction, she turned away, moving with surprising agility for her age as she mounted her horse. Falana approached last, her face composed into careful neutrality for the benefit of watching eyes. Remember your promise, she said formally, loud enough for Thompson to hear. No white hunters near our winter grounds. I'll spread the word, Quentin replied with equal formality. But as he helped her mount, his hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary, and she slipped something into his palm, a small carved wooden bear. For protection, she whispered. Until spring. Then they were gone, 3 figures riding up into the mountains, disappearing into the trees. Quentin stood watching long after they had vanished from sight, the carved bear clutched tightly in his hand. Quite a woman, Thompson observed, coming to stand beside him. Yes, Quentin agreed, she is. The old trader studied him shrewdly. You know what you're getting into, son. Loving an Apache woman won't win you any friends among your own kind. Quentin turned the bear, carving over in his palm. My father once told me something I didn't understand until now. He said, the opinions of fools aren't worth the breath they're spoken with. Took me a long time to realize he was right. Thompson chuckled. Wise man, your father, he clapped Quentin on the shoulder. Well, you're welcome to stay on here until spring, if you've a mind to. Could use the help, and it'll keep you close for when those blue flowers start blooming. Thank you, Quentin said, surprised and touched by the offer. I'd be glad to stay. The winter months passed in a rhythm of work and waiting. Quentin helped Thompson maintain the trading post, hunted for their meals, and used his earnings to make improvements on the small homestead he had claimed. Whenever native traders came to the post, he listened carefully for news of the Apache band in the mountains, but heard little beyond rumors of their continued presence far from soldier patrols. As winter gradually loosened its grip, Quentin found himself scanning the mountainsides daily, watching for the first signs of the blue flowers Nantai had mentioned. Thompson, who had become something of a mentor and friend, identified them as mountain lupin, which typically bloomed in late April or early May depending on the winter's severity. You truly mean to go through with this, don't you? The old trader asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Yes, Quentin replied simply. Thompson puffed thoughtfully on his pipe. Been thinking on it all winter, reckon you might actually have a chance. Quentin looked at him, surprised. How so? That old woman, Nantai, she's respected among her people. If she's giving you instructions instead of warnings, she might be coming around to the idea. He tapped his pipe against the porch rail. And that bit about the sleeping bear rock, that's significant. You know the place. Thompson nodded. About a day's ride up. Used to be a meeting place for trading between tribes before white men came. Sacred ground, neutral territory. He gave Quentin a meaningful look. Not the sort of place she'd direct you to if she meant you harm. Hope surged in Quentin's chest. You think she's arranging for Falana to meet me there? Possibly. Or at least creating an opportunity. The old man's eyes crinkled with amusement. That young woman strikes me as determined enough to make her own way regardless. Quentin smiled, thinking of Falana's quiet strength. You're right about that. As April turned to May, the first blue lupins began appearing on the lower slopes, their delicate blossoms spreading like a lavender mist across the mountainsides. Quentin prepared for his journey, packing supplies for several days and carefully selecting gifts that would be both practical and meaningful to Falana and her family. The morning of his departure dawned clear and warm. Thompson helped him saddle his horse and secure his packs. Remember, the old man advised, patience at the meeting place. 3 days, she said. Apache don't trust easily and for good reason. They'll watch you before they approach. Quentin nodded, taking the advice to heart. I'll wait as long as it takes. Thompson handed him a small package wrapped in oilskin. Coffee and sugar, special blend for the old woman. Proper respect goes a long way. Touched by the thoughtful gesture, Quentin tucked the package carefully into his saddlebag. Thank you. For everything. The older man waved away his gratitude. Just want to see how this story ends. Don't disappoint an old man by getting yourself killed. With a laugh, Quentin mounted his horse. I'll do my best to stay alive. The journey to the Sleeping Bear Rock took most of the day, leading Quentin higher into the mountains along game trails and ancient paths. The air grew cooler as he ascended, filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. By late afternoon, he spotted his destination, a massive boulder perched on the edge of a small plateau, its shape indeed resembling a bear at rest. The site offered a commanding view of the valleys below while being sheltered by trees on 3 sides, a perfect location for both defense and concealment. Quentin made camp near the rock but not too close, respecting its possible sacred significance. As Thompson had advised, he kept his fire small and behaved as if he were being observed at all times, which he strongly suspected was the case. The first day passed without incident. Quentin explored the immediate area, gathered wood, and spent time simply sitting quietly, occasionally speaking aloud his hopes and intentions, in case unseen ears were listening. He left small offerings of tobacco and dried meat on the Sleeping Bear Rock, traditional gestures of respect he had learned from Thompson. The second day brought rain, a gentle spring shower that soaked the mountainside and left everything smelling fresh and alive. Quentin maintained his patience, using the time to carve a small wooden figure, a horse, Falana's favorite animal. As dusk approached, he thought he glimpsed movement in the trees across the small clearing, but when he looked directly, there was nothing to see. On the morning of the 3rd day, Quentin woke with a sense of anticipation. Something felt different, though he couldn't have explained why. He prepared coffee and a simple breakfast, setting out an extra cup as he had each morning, a hopeful gesture. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the clearing, Quentin sat with his back against a tree, whittling another small figure. He had deliberately positioned himself to appear relaxed while maintaining awareness of his surroundings. Thus, he wasn't entirely surprised when a voice spoke from the edge of the trees. "You are persistent, Quentin Xavier." He looked up slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. Falana stood at the forest's edge, dressed in a buckskin dress with her hair in 2 long braids. She was alone, though Quentin had no doubt others were watching from concealment. "I made a promise," he replied simply, setting aside his carving but remaining seated. Falana approached cautiously, stopping several yards away. "My grandmother said you would probably not come. That white men's promises are like morning mist. They vanish when the sun grows hot." "And what did you think?" Quentin asked. A small smile touched her lips. "I said you would be here." The simple statement warmed him more than the spring sunshine. "I missed you." "And I you," she admitted, moving closer, "though I should not have." "Why not?" Falana gestured to the mountains around them. "This is my world, my people. We have already lost so much to white men." "To care for one," she shook her head. "Some call it betrayal." "Is that what you believe?" Quentin asked quietly. She met his eyes directly. No, but it does not matter what I believe. What matters is what can be. What is possible? And what is possible for us, Falana? Instead of answering immediately, she closed the remaining distance between them, kneeling beside him. Up close he could see new lines of strain around her eyes. The winter had been hard, perhaps, or the conflict within her deeper than he had realized. That depends, she said finally, on how much you are willing to sacrifice. And how much I am. Quentin reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. I have the land I told you about. It's good land with water and shelter, far enough from towns to be peaceful, close enough to trade when needed. He hesitated. I thought perhaps it could be a place where both worlds meet, not just for us but for your family, your grandmother, your sister. Surprise flickered across Falana's face. You would welcome them. Of course, Quentin replied, squeezing her hand. They're your family. She studied him intently, searching for any sign of insincerity. My uncle will never agree. He has lost too much to trust any white man. I understand, Quentin said, and I wouldn't ask you to break with your people entirely, but perhaps we could find a middle path. A way to honor both worlds. Falana was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Then she smiled, a slow, radiant smile that transformed her face. My grandmother said you would say such things, she revealed. She said your heart speaks truth, even when your understanding is limited. She's here, Quentin glanced around, seeing no one. Watching, Falana confirmed, along with my sister and 2 cousins. They insisted on coming to judge for themselves. What kind of man would wait 3 days on a mountainside for an Apache woman? The knowledge that he was being evaluated by Falana's family made Quentin both nervous and hopeful. And what have they decided? They are still deciding, she said, her eyes twinkling slightly. But my grandmother was impressed by your offerings and by your patience. As if summoned by their conversation, movement at the edge of the clearing drew Quentin's attention. Nantai emerged from the trees, her posture straight despite her age, her face set in stern lines. Behind her came Ziva and 2 young men who regarded Quentin with undisguised suspicion. Quentin stood slowly, respectfully, as they approached. Falana rose beside him, her hand finding his again in a silent show of unity that did not go unnoticed by the others. Grandmother, Falana greeted in Apache, then switched to English for Quentin's benefit. He has waited as you said he must. Nantai acknowledged this with a slight nod, her sharp eyes assessing Quentin. 3 days is little compared to a lifetime, she observed. If you truly wish to join with my granddaughter, the waiting has only begun. I understand, Quentin replied, meeting her gaze steadily. And I'm prepared to prove myself however necessary. The old woman's expression remained stern, but something in her eyes softened slightly. She spoke rapidly in Apache to the others, prompting a heated discussion that Quentin could not follow. Falana occasionally joined in, her voice growing increasingly passionate as she gestured toward him and then to the valleys below. Finally, Nantai raised a hand, silencing them all. She turned back to Quentin. My granddaughter says you have land, good land with water. Yes, Quentin confirmed. About half a day's ride from here, enough for gardens, horses, and some cattle. And you would have her live there. Away from her people. Quentin chose his words carefully. I would have us build a life there together, one where she and any of her family who wished to join us could live in peace, practicing your traditions without fear. Nantai considered this. Our ways are not your ways. No, Quentin agreed, but perhaps we can learn from each other, find a new way that honors both. The old woman's gaze was penetrating, seeming to look through him rather than at him. You speak well for a white man, but words are easy, actions prove truth. Tell me what I must do, Quentin said simply. Another rapid exchange in Apache followed, with Ziva and the 2 young men gesturing animatedly. Whatever they were proposing caused Falana to protest sharply, but Nantai silenced her with a look. You will come with us, the old woman decided finally. To our summer camp. There you will live for 1 moon cycle, learning our ways. If after that time you still wish to join with Falana and she with you, we will speak again of this land and this future you imagine. The offer or challenge took Quentin by surprise. Spending a month in an Apache camp would mean placing himself completely at their mercy, trusting them with his life. It would also mean a deeper understanding of Falana's world than he had ever expected to gain. What about my horse? My supplies, he asked, practical concerns momentarily outweighing the magnitude of the invitation. Nanta gestured to one of the young men. Tagosh will bring them. You will be blindfolded for part of the journey. It was not a request, but a statement of fact. Quentin glanced at Falana, who nodded almost imperceptibly, encouragement in her eyes. I accept, he said, addressing Nantai formally, and I thank you for this opportunity to prove myself. The old woman's expression remained impassive, but she inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. We leave now, gather what you need. As the others began breaking down his small camp, Falana moved closer to Quentin, speaking softly. This is more than I hoped for, she admitted. No white man has ever been invited to stay among us, even temporarily. Your grandmother is taking a great risk, Quentin observed, keeping his voice low. The others don't all seem pleased with her decision. Falana's expression grew serious. No, my cousins argued against it. They say all white men bring destruction eventually. She touched the medicine pouch still hanging around his neck. But my grandmother believes in signs. She says the spirits have marked you as different. And what do you believe? Her dark eyes met his, filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I believe that what grows between us is strong enough to weather many storms. But the path will not be easy, Quentin. There will be those on both sides who wish us to fail. Then we'll just have to prove them wrong, he replied, taking her hand and raising it to his lips. The gesture earned him a suspicious glare from one of the cousins, but Falana's answering smile was worth it. Yes, she agreed softly, we will. The journey to the Apache camp took the remainder of the day, with Quentin blindfolded for several hours as they navigated what felt like increasingly difficult terrain. When the blindfold was finally removed, they had reached a high mountain valley sheltered by towering cliffs on three sides, a natural fortress accessible only by the narrow path they had ascended. The camp itself was larger than Quentin had expected, with perhaps 30 hide-covered lodges arranged in a rough circle. As their small party approached, activity in the camp slowed, then stopped altogether as people emerged to stare at the unprecedented sight of a white man being led willingly into their midst. Children were hurriedly pulled aside, women watched with wary expressions, and men reached instinctively for weapons. The tension was palpable, broken only when Nantai called out in Apache, her authoritative voice carrying across the suddenly silent camp. Whatever she said caused a ripple of murmurs but no immediate protest. Quentin remained still, aware that every eye was upon him, judging, assessing the threat he might represent. A tall, powerfully built man with streaks of gray in his long hair stepped forward, his face set in hard lines as he addressed Nantai sharply. The exchange that followed was tense, with the man occasionally gesturing toward Quentin with clear displeasure. My uncle, Falana whispered. He is angry that grandmother brought you here. After several minutes of heated discussion, the man turned his attention to Quentin directly. I am Nate, he said in heavily accented English, leader of this band. My mother says you wish to take Falana away from her people. Quentin met the man's hostile gaze steadily. With respect, that is not my intention. I hope to build a life with Falana that honors both our worlds. Nate's expression hardened further. There is no honor possible between Apache and white men, only blood and betrayal. Uncle, Falana interjected, stepping forward. Quentin is not like the soldiers or the settlers who have wronged us. He has shown respect for our ways. Nate silenced her with a look. You are blinded by feelings, I see clearly. He turned back to Quentin. My mother believes in signs and dreams. I believe in what I have seen with my own eyes. Every promise made by white men has been broken, every treaty violated. I cannot change the past, Quentin acknowledged, or answer for the actions of others. I can only offer my own word and the chance to prove it true. The simplicity of the statement seemed to give Nate pause. He studied Quentin for a long moment before speaking again. My mother says you will stay one moon cycle, learn our ways. His tone made it clear he considered this folly. So be it, but you will be watched at all times. If you bring harm to any of my people, your death will be slow. With that cheerful welcome, Nate turned and walked away, leaving Quentin standing with Falana and Nantai. The old woman appeared satisfied with the outcome, despite her son's obvious disapproval. "Come," she instructed, gesturing for them to follow. "You will stay in Ziva's lodge. Falana will show you our ways." The following weeks tested Quentin in ways he had never imagined. Physical hardships were expected, sleeping on hard ground, helping with hunting and gathering, learning to move silently through forest and meadow. More challenging were the cultural barriers, the constant awareness of being an outsider, and the open hostility from some members of the band, particularly Nate and his closest followers. Yet there were unexpected moments of connection, too. Ziva appointed herself his unofficial guide, her initial wariness giving way to curiosity about his life and world. Several children, after the initial shock wore off, began following him around, giggling when he attempted to pronounce Apache words. And most precious of all were the times with Falana, working side by side, teaching each other their languages, sharing stories under the vast mountain sky. Quentin learned to identify edible plants, to track game through difficult terrain, to read weather patterns in the clouds. He watched as Falana practiced the healing arts under her grandmother's guidance, treating everything from fevers to broken bones with plants and poultices whose preparation had been passed down through generations. As days turned to weeks, subtle changes occurred within the camp. The constant surveillance became less obvious. Fewer conversations stopped when he approached. Some of the women began offering him food without Falana's prompting, and one of the older men invited him to join a hunting party. Nate remained distant and skeptical, but even he seemed grudgingly impressed when Quentin successfully tracked and killed a deer using Apache methods, then performed the traditional rituals of thanks that Falana had taught him. "You learn quickly for a white man," the leader observed afterward, the closest thing to a compliment Quentin had received from him. "I have good teachers," Quentin replied, including Nate in his glance. The acknowledgement seemed to surprise the older man, who merely nodded before walking away. Later that evening, as they sat by the cooking fire outside Ziva's lodge, Falana leaned close to Quentin, her voice low. "You are winning them over," she said, a note of wonder in her tone. "Even my uncle's closest friends now say perhaps you are different from other white men." Quentin smiled, watching the firelight play across her beautiful face. "I'm glad. Though I still think your uncle would prefer to find me at the bottom of a canyon." Falana laughed softly. "Perhaps, but he respects strength and honesty, both of which you have shown." Her expression grew more serious. "The moon cycle is nearly complete. Soon you must decide if this is truly the path you wish to walk." "I decided that months ago," Quentin replied, taking her hand. "The question is whether your people will accept us." "Not all," she admitted, "but enough, I think, grandmother says." Whatever Nantai had said was interrupted by sudden shouts from the edge of camp. Both Quentin and Falana rose quickly as a young warrior ran toward the central fire, calling out in rapid Apache. "What is it?" Quentin asked, recognizing the signs of alarm. Falana's face had gone pale. "Soldiers in the lower valley." "With Apache scouts." The camp erupted into controlled chaos as people began gathering essential supplies, dousing fires, and preparing for possible evacuation. Nate emerged from his lodge, issuing rapid commands that sent warriors to defensive positions while women secured children and elders. "How close?" Quentin asked Falana as they hurried to help Ziva gather her belongings. "Too close," she replied grimly. "The scouts must have found one of the lower trails if they follow it." She didn't need to finish. If the soldiers discovered the hidden path to the high valley, the entire band would be vulnerable. Nate approached them, his expression thunderous. "Did you lead them here, white man?" he demanded, hand hovering near his knife. "No," Quentin protested immediately. "I was blindfolded, remember. I couldn't find this place again if I tried, let alone lead others here." "Uncle, please," Falana interjected. "Quentin has been with us for weeks. When could he have sent word to soldiers?" Nate's suspicious glare didn't waver. "Perhaps before he came to the meeting place, perhaps." "Enough," Nantai's authoritative voice cut through the tension. She had approached unnoticed, her slight frame somehow commanding despite the crisis. "This helps nothing. The soldiers come. We must decide what to do." Nate turned to his mother reluctantly. "We move deeper into the mountains. There are caves." "And if they follow," she challenged. If their Apache scouts track us, we have children, elders, the caves are cold and have little water. What choice do we have? Nate demanded. Quentin stepped forward hesitantly. May I speak? All three turned to him with varying expressions of surprise and suspicion. After a moment, Nantai nodded. If these are regular army patrols, they're likely just mapping the area, not specifically hunting your band, Quentin explained. They probably don't even know you're here. How can you be sure? Nate asked skeptically. I can't, Quentin admitted, but I could find out. Let me approach them alone as a lost prospector. I can learn their intentions without revealing anything about your camp. The suggestion was met with stunned silence. Nate recovered first. You would risk yourself for our people? He asked, disbelief evident in his voice. For Falana, Quentin replied honestly, and for all of you who have shared your home with me despite your misgivings. Falana grabbed his arm. No, if they recognize you, if they suspect. They won't, Quentin assured her. I've worked with cattle drives that supplied army posts. I know how to talk to soldiers without raising suspicion. A rapid discussion in Apache followed, with Nantai surprisingly supporting Quentin's proposal while Nate and Falana argued against it. Finally, the old woman raised her hand for silence. He will go, she declared, but not alone. Tagosh will follow, hidden, to bring word if there is treachery. Nate didn't look pleased, but he nodded reluctantly. If you betray us. I won't, Quentin interrupted firmly. You have my word. Preparations were made quickly. Quentin changed into the clothes he had arrived in, deliberately dirtied them to support his story of being lost, and gathered minimal supplies that a prospector might carry. As he prepared to leave, Falana pulled him aside, her eyes bright with worry. This is madness, she whispered fiercely. If they discover you are helping Apache. They won't, Quentin promised, cupping her face gently. I'll learn what they're doing here and return before nightfall. And if you do not return, she asked, her voice breaking slightly. He touched the medicine pouch at his neck. Then you'll know I tried my best. He kissed her quickly, aware of watching eyes. Wait for me, trust me. Before she could protest further, he turned and followed Tagosh toward the hidden trail that would lead him down to the lower valleys where soldiers had been spotted. The descent was tense, with Tagosh moving like a shadow ahead of him, occasionally holding up a hand for silence as they navigated the difficult terrain. When they reached the lower forests, the Apache warrior pointed toward a thin column of smoke visible through the trees, then melted back into the undergrowth, his role now to observe from a safe distance. Quentin approached the military camp cautiously, deliberately making enough noise to announce his presence before he could be mistaken for a threat. As he emerged into the small clearing, he found himself facing the rifles of two nervous young soldiers who clearly hadn't expected company. Hold your fire, Quentin called, raising his hands. Just a prospector, got myself turned around up in those ridges. After a tense moment, an older man with sergeant's stripes emerged from a tent, signaling the soldiers to lower their weapons. Mighty far from anywhere to be prospecting alone, the sergeant observed skeptically, looking Quentin up and down. Heard rumors of silver up in those northern canyons, Quentin replied easily, falling into the role of a slightly desperate fortune-seeker. Been at it 3 weeks now. Was heading back to restock supplies when I lost my bearings in that last storm. The sergeant's suspicion seemed to ease slightly. Well, you're in luck. We're heading back to Fort Whipple tomorrow. You can ride along. Much obliged, Quentin said, allowing relief to show in his expression. Don't suppose you boys have coffee, been living on what I could hunt for days now. The invitation to share their fire gave Quentin the opening he needed. As they sat drinking strong army coffee, he carefully steered the conversation toward their presence in the area. Surprised to see the army this far up, he commented casually. Thought most of the action was down south these days. The sergeant shrugged. Just mapping expeditions. General wants updated surveys of these northern valleys. Says the old maps aren't worth the paper they're drawn on. Any trouble with hostiles? Quentin asked, keeping his tone merely curious. Not lately, one of the younger soldiers replied. Word is most of the Apache in these parts moved on after that last campaign, heading for the reservation, they say. The sergeant gave the young man a sharp look. You talk too much, Jenkins. Just making conversation, Sarge, the soldier protested. Quentin filed away the information, relief washing through him. This wasn't a hunting party, just a standard mapping expedition unlikely to venture into the higher, more difficult terrain where the Apache camp was hidden. "How long you been out here?" he asked, maintaining his role. 2 weeks, the sergeant replied. "Heading back tomorrow, like I said, got what we came for." The conversation continued casually as the afternoon wore on. Quentin learned that the patrol consisted of only 8 men, including 2 Apache scouts who were currently out checking the eastern approaches. The knowledge that scouts were involved was concerning. They might be more likely to notice signs of the hidden camp, but the sergeant's indication that they were nearly finished with their mission suggested the risk would soon pass. As evening approached, Quentin made a show of consulting a battered compass and reorienting himself. "Think I can find my way back to my camp from here," he announced, standing. "Got supplies there I don't want to leave behind." The sergeant frowned. "Might be smarter to stay with us, head back to civilization tomorrow." "Appreciate the offer," Quentin replied, "but I've got equipment worth more than I can afford to lose. I'll catch up with you tomorrow if I can." Though clearly doubtful, the sergeant didn't press the issue. With directions to Fort Whipple in case he got lost again, and a packet of army hardtack for the journey, Quentin left the soldiers' camp, circling well away before beginning the ascent back toward the hidden trail where Tagosh would be waiting. The Apache warrior materialized from the shadows as Quentin approached, his expression questioning. "Mapping party," Quentin explained quietly. 8 men, including 2 scouts. "They're heading back to Fort Whipple tomorrow." Tagosh nodded, obvious relief in his typically stoic expression. He gestured for Quentin to follow as they began the steep climb back to the high valley. Night had fallen by the time they reached the Apache camp, where an anxious group awaited their return. Falana broke away from the others as Quentin approached, throwing herself into his arms with uncharacteristic public abandon. "You are safe," she breathed, holding him tightly. "As promised," he replied, returning her embrace before turning to Nate and Nantai, who waited with the other leaders. Quentin repeated what he had learned about the soldiers' mission, their limited numbers, and their planned departure. As he spoke, he noticed the shift in how the others regarded him, the suspicion giving way to something approaching respect, especially when Tagosh confirmed his account with additional details observed from hiding. When he finished, Nate stepped forward. The leader's face remained stern, but something had changed in his eyes. "You risked yourself for our people today," he acknowledged. "This I will not forget." Coming from Nate, it was tantamount to a blessing. The others murmured agreement, several nodding with new appreciation as they regarded the white man who had proven himself trustworthy in a crisis. Nantai's eyes held a knowing gleam as she observed the exchange. "The moon cycle ends tomorrow," she reminded them. "It seems the spirits have sent us a clear sign of this man's heart." Later that night, as the camp settled back into uneasy but hopeful rest, Quentin and Falana sat together outside Ziva's lodge, their hands intertwined. "You could have left with those soldiers," Falana observed quietly. "Return to your world without looking back." "That's not my world anymore," Quentin replied, squeezing her hand. "My world is wherever you are." She leaned against him, her voice soft but certain. "When the council meets tomorrow, I will tell them I choose to go with you to this land you have found. To build something new together. And if they refuse—" Falana's expression was resolute. "Then we will find another way, but I think after today, even my uncle will not stand against us." The following day, as the moon cycle completed its turn, the Council of Elders gathered to decide the fate of Quentin Xavier and Falana Hopi. The discussion was long, with many voices raised both for and against the unprecedented union. Nate, to everyone's surprise, spoke neither for nor against, but simply recounted Quentin's actions during the soldiers' incursion without editorial comment. When all had spoken, Nantai rose, her slight frame somehow commanding the attention of the entire gathering. "I have watched this man," she said in Apache, which Falana translated softly for Quentin. "I have seen his heart. It is true that the path my granddaughter wishes to walk is difficult and untested, but it is also true that our old ways must find new forms if our people are to survive in this changing world." She turned to face Quentin directly, switching to English. "If my granddaughter goes with you, she does not go alone. I will come, and Ziva also. Perhaps others in time, if your promises prove true." The declaration sent a ripple of surprise through the gathering. Nate stood abruptly. "Mother," he protested, "your place is here with your people." "My place is with my family," she corrected firmly. "As it has always been, Falana and Ziva are my heart. Where they go, I go." Her expression softened slightly as she regarded her son. "But we will not go far. This land he speaks of is close enough that we may still see each other when the seasons change." The discussion continued, but the outcome now seemed inevitable. By sunset, the council had reached its decision. Falana would be permitted to join with Quentin, with Nantai and Ziva accompanying them to the new homestead. Others might visit or even join them in time if the arrangement proved beneficial. Though not everyone approved, none would actively oppose what was clearly Nantai's will. As the council dispersed, Nate approached Quentin privately, his expression still guarded but no longer openly hostile. "My mother and my nieces will live under your protection now," he said solemnly. "If harm comes to them because of you, there is nowhere on this earth you could hide from me." "I understand," Quentin replied with equal solemnity. "I will protect them with my life." The Apache leader studied him for a long moment before giving a single nod of acknowledgement. "See that you do," he hesitated, then added, "When the leaves turn, I will come to see this place you have made." It was as close to a blessing as Nate would offer, and Quentin accepted it as such. "You will always be welcome." 3 days later, a small group departed the Apache camp. Quentin rode point, with Falana, Nantai, and Ziva following on their own horses, leading pack animals laden with their essential belongings. Several warriors, including Tagosh, accompanied them as far as the valley's edge, both as protection and as a signal of the band's qualified acceptance of this new path. At the boundary where they would part ways, Falana embraced her cousins and the other women who had come to bid farewell. There were tears and laughter, promises to visit, medicine bundles exchanged. Though not a permanent goodbye, everyone understood that a significant change was occurring, a bold experiment that might open new possibilities for their people or end in heartache. As they prepared to continue alone, Tagosh approached Quentin, speaking to him directly for the first time in halting English. "You protect them," he said simply, gesturing toward the three women. "Or I find you." Quentin recognized the statement for what it was, not just a threat, but an expression of care for people Tagosh considered family. "I will," he promised. "And when you visit, you'll see that for yourself." The young warrior nodded once, then stepped back to join the others as Quentin led his small party down the hidden trail toward their new beginning. The journey to Quentin's homestead took 2 days, traveling at a pace comfortable for Nantai. As they crested the final ridge, the small valley came into view below, a patch of green nestled between protective hills, with a clear stream winding through its center and the solid beginnings of a cabin positioned to catch both morning sun and cooling afternoon shade. "There it is," Quentin said, reining his horse to a halt beside Falana. "What do you think?" She studied the valley with a critical eye, taking in the natural features, the access points, the proximity to forests and meadows. "It has good water," she observed practically, "and many healing plants grow in such places." Nantai had already begun her own assessment, murmuring observations to Ziva about the types of soil, the direction of prevailing winds, and the signs of game in the surrounding hills. "The cabin is small," Falana noted as they rode closer, "but well placed." "It's just the beginning," Quentin explained. "I've only worked on it when I could get away from the trading post. Now that we're here, we can build it properly. Add rooms as needed." They made camp near the cabin that evening, the women exploring the valley while Quentin hunted successfully for their dinner. As they sat around the fire later, Nantai surprised them by producing a small leather pouch of ceremonial items. "This place must be blessed," she announced, "if it is to be our new home." The simple ceremony that followed blended Apache traditions with practical considerations, prayers for protection, rituals to honor the spirits of the land, and careful attention to the positioning of their temporary shelters. Quentin participated respectfully, following Falana's lead and adding his own heartfelt prayers of thanks for the journey that had brought them together. As the fire burned low, Nantai fixed him with her penetrating gaze across the flames. "Tomorrow, you and Falana will be joined according to our ways," she declared, "and then you will expand this shelter to make room for our family to grow." The announcement took both Quentin and Falana by surprise, though neither objected. They had assumed a longer transition period might be expected, but Nantai, having made her decision, saw no reason for delay. "Yes, grandmother," Falana agreed, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she glanced at Quentin. "Thank you," he added sincerely, understanding the significance of Nantai's willingness to perform the traditional ceremony herself, lending her considerable authority to their union. That night, as they settled into their separate shelters, Quentin in the partial cabin, the women in a traditional brush arbor they had constructed, he found himself filled with a sense of rightness and purpose that had eluded him for most of his adult life. The emptiness that had driven him from place to place, the fear of attachment that had kept him isolated, both seemed distant now, replaced by a profound certainty that he had found his true home. The morning dawned clear and bright, birds calling from the surrounding trees as if celebrating the day's significance. Ziva disappeared into the forest and returned with wildflowers, which she wove into Falana's hair with teasing comments that made her sister laugh despite her nervousness. Nantai presided over preparations with calm efficiency, instructing Quentin in the traditional elements of an Apache wedding ceremony while adapting certain aspects to accommodate their unique circumstances. By midday, everything was ready. The ceremony itself was simple yet profound. Standing before Nantai with the valley spread around them, Quentin and Falana exchanged promises in both English and Apache. They shared food from the same bowl, drank water from the same cup, and received blessings from Nantai that invoked the spirits of ancestors and the fertile earth beneath their feet. When it was complete, Nantai draped a beautifully woven blanket around both their shoulders, binding them together symbolically as she spoke the final words of blessing. "Now you are one family," she declared. "May your union bring strength to both your peoples. May the children of your children remember this day when two worlds joined in peace." Ziva cheered and embraced them both, her youthful enthusiasm breaking the ceremony's solemnity. Quentin held Falana close, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a chance meeting by a stream to standing as husband and wife in a valley that would become their shared home. "Are you happy?" he asked softly, searching her beautiful face. Falana's dark eyes shone with emotion as she nodded. "Yes," she replied simply, "this is where I am meant to be." In the weeks and months that followed, their small homestead began to take shape. The cabin expanded room by room, with Quentin teaching Ziva and Falana construction techniques, while incorporating design elements they suggested from Apache traditions. Nantai established gardens filled with both food plants and medicinal herbs, her knowledge of growing cycles proving invaluable in their high valley setting. Word of their unusual arrangement spread gradually. Thompson from the trading post became a regular visitor, bringing supplies and news from the wider world. Occasionally, members of Falana's band would appear silently at the valley's edge, watching cautiously before approaching with small gifts or simply to see for themselves how the experiment was progressing. True to his word, Nate arrived when the autumn leaves turned gold, accompanied by Tagosh and several other warriors. Their visit was brief but significant, a tentative bridge between worlds that had previously known only conflict. Quentin showed them the improvements to the land, the growing herds of horses and cattle, the carefully tended gardens. Though Nate remained reserved, his grudging approval was evident in his willingness to sleep under Quentin's roof and share his food. As winter approached, they prepared the homestead for the colder months, laying in supplies and completing the cabin's construction. The evening before the first heavy snow, as they sat together around the hearth fire, Falana made an announcement that brought tears to Nantai's eyes and a speechless joy to Quentin's heart. "By spring our family will grow by one more," she said, placing Quentin's hand gently on her stomach. "The spirits have blessed our union." That night, holding Falana close in their shared bed, Quentin marveled at how completely his life had transformed. The man who had once believed that love was a weakness to be avoided now found it to be his greatest strength. "I never thought I could be this happy," he whispered against Falana's hair. "You've given me everything I never knew I needed." She turned in his arms, her face luminous in the fading firelight. "And you have given me a home where I do not have to choose between worlds but can honor both." Her hand found his, guiding it again to where their child grew. "Our child will know the best of all their heritage, Apache wisdom, American strength, and the love that brought their parents together against all odds." as snow began to fall outside, blanketing their valley in pristine white. Quentin and Falana dreamed together of the future they were building, a future where the barriers between peoples might be bridged one family at a time, where love could indeed flourish on the frontier, and where a chance encounter by a stream could grow into a legacy of healing and hope for generations to come.